Alright, so you picked up Oblivion Override. It is a action roguelike game with robots that fight other robots. It is actually extremely fun to play. It's very action-packed, and it has a lot of exploration to do as well, which is some of my favorite things. With the amount of time I've spent on the game, I figured, especially as someone who enjoys action roguelikes, maybe a 5 things I wish I knew on the YouTube channel would be a great place to start with this content. So what I have for you today are the 5 things that I have uncovered as I played through the game that's made the game a little easier for me to get through and a little more enjoyable as well. So number 1, as I said, the game is an action roguelike, and there's a lot of different games that are action roguelikes. You have your Hades, you have your Dead Cells, you have your One Step from Edens, your Spelunkies, your Binding of Isaacs. They're all different in their own way. This game has a couple of draws from each. So when you're thinking about picking up an action roguelike, this is a game that has biomes to explore. That means you are traversing through different levels, you're platforming, you're dodging traps, you're fighting enemies along the way, you are stopped into a room to fight multiple enemies at once. The game also has some bullet hell as well as combo juggling. It's decently far from Hades, except for the emphasis on dodging, and is pretty on par with Dead Cells and Skull in regards to fighting either one enemy or multiple enemies at once. I would encourage you to full clear the biome, so not only are you getting general gameplay knowledge about how to traverse the map and fight monsters normally, you're also getting the various currencies in the game, which brings us into the second of our 5 things I wish I knew. The in-game currency is called scripts. You use these scripts to buy gear and health from various NPCs in every biome. As you're fighting enemies, you're also getting the golden coins, which are your SFTs, are used with Nico, which is an NPC that unlocks different weapons that you get to play throughout the game. The green cubes are what we call meta currency. This increases the character progressively as you play the game. Then finally, there is a yellow currency. The yellow currency is, I believe, a robot secretion, if I remember correctly. But what that does is it actually levels up the game as a whole in the biomes. If you play Hades, you can think of it as the gemstone system, but there's various things in here that are actually very helpful to get through a game. While we're talking about these meta upgrades, I'll give you at least a little bit of a priority on which ones I think helped me out the most. With the SFTs, you can buy whatever weapon you want. Just take whatever looks fun. I won't say that one weapon is better than any others. For the green cubes, however, I find that the most impactful things I picked up were a chance to get an item at the base store, chance to restore 5 HP when you activate an evolution, and get a nanite matrix after killing the boss. After that, I went straight into the blue tree, which has even more cool stuff. You get to start off with 40 scripts. You have chance to find hidden areas in every biome. There's actually an evolution guide, which is a codex that shows you all the available mutations in the game. And then there's also bonus nanites when you clear a battle. The nanites are your XP, and we'll get to that in a minute. With the yellow secretions, the things that impacted the gameplay the most for me were the energy stations. That actually gives you the chance to heal yourself in a biome outside of having the shop. And then also Nano Disintegrator. And honestly, the Nano Disintegrator, if I knew I had this sooner, I would have gotten it at the very first time I saw it. This allows you to recycle weapons that you find throughout a run. So now let's talk about an actual run itself. So as I said, it's an action game. Your focus is on defeating enemies as quickly and painlessly as possible. I personally changed the dodge roll button, which was originally tied to the R2, to circle. And even though I played it with R2 for a while, I found that later on I was getting abilities that required me to hit both circle button and another button at the same time. For combat, there's a couple of things to remember. You have a weapon that you can look at, either the C button if you're playing on keyboard, or its left bumper if you're playing on the controller. That's L1 for all my PlayStation players. Make sure that you read the weapon and understand what it does. For example, I'm looking at a spare tire. This thing kicks out a spare, which is our skill, and then Pack Light is a buff that applies to whenever we use Spinning Spare. Every weapon has a different setup, and knowing how both the skill and the actual weapon itself function together helps fighting enemies a lot more. Now, the enemies themselves kind of go into 3 different pools. There are basic plebs, which are like your standard robots. They don't really do anything until you aggro them, and they are highly susceptible to being staggered. Then there are other enemies, which I will call elites. These are monsters that have typically a border around them constantly. That border is what they call guard in this game. A monster that is guarded cannot be staggered by basic attacks. Some weapons have anti-guard tech built in, especially for their skills. The tire that I'm using does not, but there are other weapons that will break the guard and allow you to stagger an elite. Now, the naming that I'm giving these is probably wrong. I'm sure the devs have a different naming convention, but just for the sake of argument, when you're fighting an elite, plan to have some kind of guard prevention. If you don't, then plan to use the dodge roll button an awful lot. Then the third tier of enemy is what I'll call a mini-boss. Mini-boss are typically in locked rooms. They are basically immune to any kind of stagger. So you can almost think of an elite that is much bigger than normal, but can't be staggered by any means. Once you start killing enemies, you'll notice that you have XP on the top left-hand corner of the screen. Those are the nanites, which you get from either an enemy or a shop. It's the pink cubes. My next tip is that you want to actually level up, surprisingly, as soon as you can. In the beginning of the game, you'll only see mutations that cost 20 nanites or 30 nanites. Eventually, you'll see things that cost even more than that. But as soon as you hit the 30 nanites, you should probably level up. The level up system in this game, which they refer to as evolving, is a choice between 3 different mutations. Some of them cost nanites, and some of them are what the game refers to as mecha skills. And the mecha skill is actually free and takes up that mecha skill slot. As soon as you get one of these, it refreshes the entire list. So if you don't like 2 of them, but one of them is a mecha skill, consider taking that for what is technically a free reroll. You're just locked into the mecha skill now. As you choose a mutation, you are filling the slots on the right-hand side that has a DNA double helix doohickey. That does have a cap to the number that fit in, but you can actually delete them later if you find out that now that you're full, you're not utilizing specific ones. The evolution system has different categories that level up after you combine 2 different named evolutions in one category. Belligerence is one category of evolution. It has Storm Chip, Spike Chip, Fatal Blow, and Efficient Flight. If you get any 2 different basic abilities, you unlock the first level of Belligerence, and you can get more levels as you continue to level it up. Eventually, there's high-powered and even duo versions. I won't get into those because I'll let you discover them yourself. But many of the category evolutions are actually integral to having a strong build or keeping you alive through healing. That being said, before you enter the boss arena, be sure to take at least a look at your L2 button to know if you need to level up or not. And then the last thing I'll say is one bonus tip for you. Do yourself a favor, head over to the settings screen and take a look to see if any of these apply to you. I, for one, had to turn screen shake off. I am a big fan of screen shake in most games, but sometimes the intensity of these fights has too much screen shake for me personally. You may also find that you want the evolution animation turned off. What that does is speed up the menu option to go into a mutation and then take it and then back out of it. I, for one, love the aesthetic, so I keep it in there, but I can understand for sake of speed, someone may want to turn it off. So there you have it, a little bit of a 5 things I wish I knew before I started playing the game. It's not really a matter of is the game worth buying or not. It's, hey, I want to enjoy the game as much as possible, so here's the things that I struggled on that I want to pass on that knowledge to you. If you like the game, here's some examples of runs that I've done over on my YouTube channel. If you learned anything from this video, give it a like, subscribe, leave a comment too. Let me know after you picked up the game which weapon you enjoyed the most. Either way, thanks for viewing, and I'll catch you on the next video.